Good afternoon. My name is Saulius. Nice to see you here. So I'm not sleepy after lunch anymore. Some time has passed. Okay, so I hope you will keep awake the whole 45 minutes or maybe slightly less. And today I'm here to talk about our experience with KanBan. And not only KanBan, actually we have used different practices, but probably KanBan is the most visible. As you can, whenever you come in, typically in an agile software development company, what you see a lot of sticky notes on the wall. So we have them too. So before starting, I would like you to watch this short clip. So what do you think? Is it agile? Yes or no? Who thinks no? Raise your hand. Who thinks yes? Okay, majority no. And why do you think so? Could someone tell? Okay, that's a good one. Okay, but if we are not using the term agile per se, but if we're talking about the principle itself of lean manufacturing, is it so or not? Okay, okay. Any other opinions?
I think lines do not stop for standard meetings, I think.
No. Line not, but the workers, I'm sure they do. Okay, so my opinion that is actually agile, and this is for a reason actually. So if we look where did agile came from actually, not from Agile Manifesto. I'm not talking about this one, but the whole concept of lean manufacturing, it came back to actually interesting to Ford factories 100 years ago. So the whole paradigm of just-in-time delivery has been developed by Japanese car makers who have adapted the best practices at the time. And those practices at the time, meaning after World War II, were at American car factories they copied them and improved. And this is nothing new to the other industries, and actually this is only somewhat new to the software development industry. And actually, I think it is very agile, And why? Because I have been myself to the BMW factory in Munich, where they produce Model 3 BMWs, and they said that on average there are 2 to 3 identical cars per year that are produced. Only so much, so many. Every single car is different online. Here you could also see the same, either different color, either different engine, and they had hundreds of parameters you could choose. When you choose the car, you can choose the color, you can choose the color of interior, very, very many different configurations, and all the parts to the assembly line, they are supplied just for that specific car. That means that every single car has different components that are logistically delivered just in time for that specific car. So this is why I think this is agile. And as software industry actually is lagging behind automotive industry about 30 to 40 years. So we are just learning from the manufacturing industry here. And luckily we do that pretty well. And I will just be using this car manufacturing sample all over the presentation to get a better idea of what I'm talking about, because software itself is very, and the process itself is very invisible. So in software terms, basically what we should be focusing when we talk about agile is minimal waste, which translates into minimal delays everywhere in the process, be it response time from the customer, be it feedback, be it response time from a development company to the customers. This is the most critical and luckily probably the only thing you have to think about. Okay, maybe not the only, but the most important. And also, what other things besides that? So you should minimize, of course, unneeded features, rework, and delays for time to market. How long does it take to deliver the feature to the market? So getting back to 1997, try to find me in this picture if you can. I was a part of a young, ambitious team that was working on a product called Magic Diagrams. Okay, so that name probably doesn't tell much. Now this thing is known as MagicDraw, and it's one of the top UML tools worldwide. And at the time, of course, we were trained to use both UML and slightly modified waterfall process, and we have to deliver the first version. So of course, according to the books, we did produce a lot of documentation, as they called rock solid software design document, rock solid functional specification. Then after 2 months, we started to develop actual source code. And after some 8 months, we had the first version that actually worked, was usable. They had full documentation, more or less intact, but had one slight problem. It was really not very extendable. So we have delivered, we calculated pretty much right, or we're lucky, I don't know. But as this was supposed to be a product, which should have been developed for many more iterations, it had to be thrown out. So effectively what we had only was a good prototype. So we were then paying more attention to the process and said, okay, this waterfall thing doesn't really work. And as we built tool for UML, also we had to eat our own lunch. That means to use UML. And we were keen to try out our own tool. How does it perform? So we used UML extensively and also implemented RAP. Why not Agile? Good question. It was back 1999. Agile was not known as a term, of course, but there was some practices like extreme programming or XP, not to be confused with extreme coding. So we were also looking at them, but the management was pressing that we have to use UML, and there was nothing about UML in extreme programming, and we had to also have at least some documentation, so we were more or less forced to choose rep, so we did. And then we tried to produce also documentation, which was not so extensive, but still quite an overhead for that product. Product was actually selling pretty good, and we had a growth of maybe 800% in 2001 and 250% in 2002. And what happened was that we kept a feature wish list, which is in Agile terms would be called Backlog, and we couldn't keep with the demands coming because we were new tool to the market. We had to deliver features ahead of competition. The market itself was very dynamic at the time. UML was very new and fashionable, so we had to deliver new version of UML as it came out ahead of competition. We also had to deliver new features to stay ahead of competition. So the pressure was high. Time to market should be very short, and RAP in itself wasn't really fit for that purpose. So, and also developers started to look somehow suspicious to this all the UML diagrams that should cover everything, and actually back then there was not much to document, as basically the tool that we were building was very GUI intensive editor. So the data model was quite stable, and you would need not to document much besides adapting new version and so on. So we quietly started to look for XP practices and applying that one by one, doing code reviews, doing closeouts at the end of the sprints. So we were iterative, but we were not really within the iteration, not very flexible. And time to market for the feature sometimes was 6 months, sometimes 2 years. And as we have adopted Agile, as we would call it in today's terms, actually things have improved. And we became more flexible, and I think that was one of the reasons why this product actually came out to the market and has a position that it has now. So basically what we have learned that, yeah, Agile works. Agile works for product development, and ultimately actually there was very little left out on the surface from that rep, and more or less it was Agile process. Okay, so we have assembly line where everyone delivers everything just in time, and the new version is produced or new iteration is produced. Another story. So now I'm in another business, at least from the model perspective. So it's custom software development. So the company I work for is a supplier of enterprise mobile solutions. We have started the company 7 years ago. And in the very beginning, we didn't use any process at all, as the projects were not very big. Occasionally we used UML, but there was not so much effort needed to run the smaller projects. But as the company grew, actually we saw that we couldn't handle all the work we have. So as we have reached 10 developers and we had a couple of project leaders, we saw that we cannot do this anymore. And it was 2 years ago, so we sent our core team here to Vilnius to Agile conference. And of course I knew that Agile worked, so we had to learn on and apply the best practices. And at the time we had about 50% of the work that we have done on support and maintenance projects. That means that all the requests from the customers came in ad hoc manner. Anytime, most of them was urgent. So we have to manage that somehow. And after discussion, we choose KanBan as one of the first tools to adapt for this process. And it worked quite well, actually. So we had This was our initial KanBan actually. Now it is not used anymore. Also, I will tell about it. We put all the projects here on the left-hand side, and here are the stages. Actually, the process ran pretty smoothly. People knew, even if the project manager was absent for a day or two, what to do, what to work on. And then what happened? So we grew more. And then as we had 15 developers on larger projects, larger meaning project of 5 to 6 people, it didn't work anymore for some reason. So then we started to ask ourselves, also we have done a lot of closeouts, a lot of analysis of what may go wrong, and we came to the conclusion actually that we are not doing all the agile practices. And what does it mean? Okay, we had KanBan, we had internal training sessions, we had closeouts, we even had stand-up meetings. So why didn't it work? And summarizing all the feedback that we got, basically we came to the conclusion that we cannot be agile on our own. And basically what happens is that whenever you are agile, you can work like that factory. If you produce all the parts for yourself. But once there's a third party coming into the chain becomes just-in-time supply chain. That means that you are very dependent on whoever you work with. Is it your customer, your supplier, the partners of the customer? So any party basically can impact you, and sometimes in very unpredictable ways. Let's look at manufacturing back again. And this is analysis of Great Japan earthquake that took place 3 years ago. Probably everyone knows Fukushima name. So it has been also caused by that. And what happened actually is that not only Japan suffered, and as you can see, industries in other countries like Thailand, Philippines, suffered even as much as Japanese industries. Why? Because they have been part of the same supply chain. And the same happens in software development. It's everything interconnected. You cannot just work on your own. Unless you do software projects or products for yourself, then yeah, that's doable. And actually, the first example that I gave was probably the perfect example. And we see here in this conference a lot of sessions where they say how Agile works for product development. Of course, it works easier because typically you are not dependent as much on the other parties. And in outsourcing, basically, you're becoming part of some bigger or smaller supply chain. And it happens everywhere, not only in software development, not only in manufacturing industry. If we look at aviation industry, let's say Boeing 787, also that was first Boeing project where they did outsource a lot of supply chain to their partners, and it caused enormous delays. It caused quality problems, and because you cannot predict everything. So I'm sure they will manage that, but this means that it's very hard to manage whenever you have many partners that you cannot directly influence. So you have to look for other ways how to work with them and how to make the process work. And getting back to the software, again, what should you look for externally is the same thing, delays. Delays that should be avoided. So I checked what does manufacturing industry actually offer when they say how to manage risks of supply chain. And these are 4 things, basically, that apply directly to the software, more or less. That is long-term relationships. What does that mean? Know your partners. How are they working? And they should know you, how you are working, what to expect. Also have some discipline for the specific procedures. Although in Agile they say, yes, focus on collaboration, but not procedures. But then how can you collaborate if you're not talking in advance what are you going to do? So this all boils down to the communication and discussion how you will work rather on what you will produce or how much it will cost. So this is probably the major difference in the contract per se. Let's say if you are working with customer in an agile way, is that you should be focusing much less on scope, much less on other parameters. You should talk about that, of course, how we'll manage. But the most important thing is to focus on process. And also build more inventory. So what's more inventory in the software development case? If you are a software development company, it's typically more projects. So that if your assembly line stops for some reason, you cannot produce more software, what do? You take on another project. Of course, it's a very good idea to have customers in line. So it's a good job for sales. And sales will be happy to hear that. But I think it's doable. And actually, if you say you're agile, then that should be easier to get. Who knows what the smell in refactoring stands for? Is there any developers? Anyone who does code refactoring? Sometimes. So what's the code smell and what's the architecture smell? Right. Okay. So you have won the major prize for the presentation, Apollo like mine. You can collect that afterwards. And so that's the correct answer. So these are smells for process, for places that are potentially dangerous and places that you have to look at whenever you work with Agile. So these are compiled from our experience, as we have done multiple projects in different environments, different setups. So this is experience that probably might be useful to you. So I will go shortly and explain what to look for. First group is for ensuring optimal flow. That means of how you are collaborating with your partners. The toughest part probably in any software project, integrations. Especially when you have to integrate with someone else's system, right? And supposedly they should run like 1, 2, 3 iterations you have done. Unfortunately, it happens more like this. And my experience is that all the advices like to have web services frozen, well documented, mocked up, they work about 90–95% of the time, if you are lucky, of course. But then remaining 5 to 10% takes remaining 90% of the time. So what to do? Actually, I think there is no other way than just have them to develop in parallel and have the two teams that, let's say, the one that is producing web services and another that is producing client for web services should be communicating during the process. Because if it's agile process and if we are doing integration, of course not to some system that is already used and well documented and is stable. I'm talking about more complex case when the systems are developed in parallel, and that's very typical. Customer says, okay, don't worry. In 2 months, we will have web services fully implemented. This is the spec, and whenever you will need, you can use them. So what happens actually is that if they are there, sometimes they are not there yet, then you will have all those pieces missing or something is slightly different. So the best recipe is actually to have developers working with each other, knowing what's happening. And this is, again, about closed, short feedback loop and short delays. You are a subcontractor. Yeah, so that happens, and actually sometimes even so that end customer doesn't even know that you are there. They are working with contractor, right? Contractor is pretending that they are doing all the work. They also outsourced some pieces of the work. And then what happens, we had such projects, is that you work with the customer, even customer might work in kind of agile way. So you produce iteration 1, iteration 2, it got accepted by contractor, and then they say, okay, in 2 more weeks, we are going to see the customer. And then we will have more feedback about version, about first iteration, about second iteration, and then you are well into third or even fourth iteration, and then you get feedback from the customer that something is not good or not enough in first iteration, so you go back to the first, and this is not agile anymore. What you should do? So avoid situations where you are not you are hidden from the customer. So try to do your best to at least get in touch with customer, even maybe under the name of a contractor, but you still have to be face-to-face to the customer just to explain or get information so that you avoid situations of getting into the Chinese whisper. Who knows what that stands for? I have one more Paulo. Did anyone hear? Yeah, but yeah, exactly. Okay, but how do you call that in Lithuanian? Bingo. So you have to, or you can share. Yeah, sugedas telefonas. Basically, that's the situation you are getting. So try to get in touch, whatever it takes, whatever it costs, in contact with the customer. It really helps. Otherwise, you have communication loop, which might be 6 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. And third party in general. So sometimes you start working for the customer, and then all of a sudden learn that there's a third party that you don't know anything about them that will be producing web services for you. Again, you should get in touch with them, discuss how they are working, talk about how you are working, so that you are on the same page and you could deliver work that is in sync. Strangers in the night. So this is about actually the real story from our experience. Okay, we made a deal with the customer, which I don't recommend repeating, so that customer people were working on our project. But the tough part was, of course, that they were sitting in their office, we are sitting in our office, and they typically had some more important tasks to do. Sometimes they could not respond for a week or so. And also we have all that customer-supplier relationship where you could not really manage customers, people per se. So I would say that it's best to avoid. And unless you know customer for a very long time, unless you know people, how they are working and so on, then might be the case. But in general, this is the pitfall that we have done, and I would rather not repeat it. Customers' priorities. Sometimes we stumble to that okay, customer is collaborative and so on, but sometimes you just cannot get the correct answer, like, okay, I didn't have time to look at it, or yeah, we looked, but we couldn't decide. So we need maybe 1 or 2 weeks after the next board meeting to decide how we proceed further. What does that mean to you? Your production assembly line just stopped. You wait, okay, you may have some some extra work to do, but typically it's not smooth, it's a delay. So the advice here is to educate the customer and have a good rapport with them so that he understands that this is what costs to you, time and delays. And also that it's okay. Even if it's not in the contract, the customer has to understand that you have a top level of specialists that are paid to do the job, and again, it's not fair after all, if they just keep waiting. Now, about the contract, the interesting part. So, Agile Manifesto says focus on agreement, but not on the contract. Focus on mutual understanding. And the smells to avoid is actually if customer is focusing on price, on terms, but says, okay, everything we will just, yeah, we are people, we know each other, we can reach an agreement to that. So it's very important. My experience is that if you work more on agreeing of how you're going to work with the customer, preferably in multiple iterations, the less problems you will have whenever the project runs. Because you will get to these questions earlier or later. And what does Agile say about failing? When you should fail? Early. Yeah, exactly. So do that early. Do that early. So solve all the problems before they arise, including the process questions. Another, yeah, maybe ironic, but it happens. I met customers like this, is that they talk a lot about Agile. They look very Agile, actually. They also know a lot about Agile. They say that also we are looking for Agile suppliers. And what happens is that they do not necessarily work in that way, even if they know how to do that, but their internal kitchen is not so agile. And as you would be going to integrate your process with these customers, you better know what's happening in their kitchen. So try to test the customer. Just look how are they working, if possible, of course, or find a way how to do that. Homework. Okay, so what's happening at the company and what should you look after? Getting back to KanBan. So, as I said, the KanBan is not used right now. There's a reason for that. After we have started to use it, we got more and more projects, and it simply could not fit in the single place. Also, it was hanging in one of the rooms, and developers from the other rooms have to come in, go out. We didn't hang it for a reason on a hallway, so it was not really practical. And the project manager decided that okay, we will have KanBan for every larger project. And that worked fine for them. But for the company, not really, because then you always have holes, as we call it, in the resources, that someone is idle, someone is overloaded in a company scope, not in a project. In a project, it evens out very well, but on a company scope, actually doesn't even out so well. So we have weekly project leader meetings, but then you are late maybe 2, 3, 4 days. So it doesn't work that way. So we decided to use electronic KanBan board, which is not that nice or gratifying that you just take some note and put it on the other place. But still, it at least is closer to whatever company-wide KanBan should be. But still, I could not say that we have found a very good working plugin for that. So we are using Redmine, and there is a plugin for that. So we are using that, but I think there are more solutions for that out there. People. And Agile is a teamwork. So some people are very strong performance. We have them too. However, when they are working for a team, they focus on their individual performance. Put that in the first place, anyhow. And what to do? So it's not easy or not possible to change the people, so we try to migrate people from one project to another. As typically they are actually very good developers, they can advise other people, other projects whenever they stumble. So this is advice that you could also utilize. Expectations regarding the process or KanBan implementation. So as I said, after 1 year of using KanBan, actually what happened was that we found that it's no longer suits us, and well, we had very high hopes that, okay, we have a process, we have implemented it, it will be easy, because everyone says, okay, there will be less documentation, there will be less overhead, so that means that you should produce less stuff, and also that means that you can reach result quickly. So my experience is that, yeah, it's hard. It's actually hard, because when I compare those efforts to implementing RAP in the company, is that we had very low hopes, because we were afraid of doing a lot of documentation, a lot of forms, a lot of diagrams, everything, and then after all we ended up with a little bit of documentation and some good practices, and we were very very happy that it works. And now we had like hopes like this, and actually, yeah, the process, it's not so easy. You always have to look after the smells, pitfalls, you have to look after continuous improvement, and well, set your expectations right. Another pitfall actually was whenever we had KanBan, it instantly affected us, so that project managers all of a sudden had a lot of free time. Not so much maybe, but of course developers started to manage themselves. Very good, very nice, but this comes as at a price. What does that mean? Is that project managers should be involved into the process improvement and also ensure that customer follows Agile. So this is the lesson that we have learned hard way. Process implementation.
When one day the Aborigine descends from the inland mountains, and as he gets closer to the coast, he jumps hundreds of centuries in only a few days. Here at Port Moresby Airport, where his trip through time ends, and where he cannot find a reason for all that he has been taught and is seen so hurriedly, the seed of the cargo cult, the cult of the cargo planes,
So this was us 1 year ago, because we thought we just implemented Agile. It works. So the lesson is that you cannot implement Agile. You have to work hard every day, look for the next waste, look for the next delays, and that actually getting back to the automotive industry, this is what made Japanese manufacturers so competitive. Kaizen, continuous improvement. So we have to do that, and guess who are the people that are most responsible for that in the company, or who do that job? The people that got a little bit of free time because of the KanBan project managers. So at least this works for us. A couple of more points. Fixed price. So our experience is actually very bad, and that mostly relates to the contract type. So if you have fixed scope contract, then go for it. Because what happens is that customer at the end of the day says, okay, I'm personally responsible for signing that you have just delivered whatever contract says. And whatever we have done with this Agile, it's a nice stuff, but still I have to put a signature on that. So be careful. Warranty, also not a part of the Agile process, actually, interestingly, but it is. So you have to discuss that, and as said, fail early. That means discuss inconvenient questions with the customers early, before the project starts. How are you going to manage it? What are you going to do about the warranty? Our experience that maintenance agreement would be the best way to go. Okay, customers waiting in line, of course, discuss that. So customers not waiting in line maybe would be better smell. Try, aim for that. Okay, so what we have tried at Agmis. So obviously KanBan, team building sessions every 6 months, internal experience sessions where everyone trains their colleagues, code reviews, which is, I think, by far the most effective way of train people. And we have also observed that even senior people can learn a lot from the younger developers' source code. Shorter iterations. Also, we had projects where we had iterations for 2 months, and I would say that these were the most unsuccessful ones. So try to aim for 3 weeks or shorter. And the tool that really works is a fail box. So whenever we started to use KanBan, everyone who failed to take the task when he was idle, he had to pay to this box. So that was the first version. Later on, cash flow actually went down, so we have to do something about this. So we have released Failbox version 2, and now it's working pretty well, as now everyone in the team has to pay if someone fails. So that's the real teamwork. Summary. So what's the difference between doing Agile for product development and what's the difference for outsourcing? So I would stress 2 points. The factor of complexity is maybe 2 or 3 times more than doing that on your own internally. And there are much more risks to manage. Customer, supplier, contracts, and so on and so on. So if you focus on these, I think you can be successful in the Agile projects. And well, I wish you good luck. And if you have any questions or comments, please tell.
Can you tell a bit more about this hand-ons? Where are you supposed to pay?
Whenever someone fails to take a task on a KanBan, that means he is idle, he has completed the task, and he is still waiting for the project manager to assign him a task. Because in KanBan, basically, project manager should not be assigning the tasks. Developer should take whatever tasks are available.
Do you have a separate testing department or separate testers?
We do.
How do you manage that testers and developers work like
So we use different techniques. We use manual testing. We write automated tests. We also use, in some project, write regression tests code before the real source code gets produced. So it differs project by project. It's not standardized in our company as of yet.
But this test department works in the same agile way, or they work in a separate way?
They are members of the team, so effectively we have 2 people, so not many.
You talked about KanBan already. Have you tried Scrum?
Scrum, we use some elements of Scrum, so I didn't mention that maybe, but we are working in iterations. So we have iteration plan and fixed date for that iteration. So, but we don't have, let's say, Scrum Masters as such.
But haven't you tried out Scrum just to find out what it is?
Pardon?
For some project, haven't you just tried out full Scrum?
Fully, I wouldn't say so that we could be said Scrum, but a lot of practices from Scrum, yes.